The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It came in waves like punishment, turning the earth into something it could no longer recognize. The town of Willow Bend was a shadow now, swallowed whole by water and silence. Roads were rivers, fields were swamps, the sky wept without end. Anna Graceland stood at the edge of what used to be a path, her boots sinking ankle-deep in mud. Her dress clung to her legs like second skin, soaked through and heavy with shame. Her trunk, once her hope, was streaked with dirt and rainwater. Her shawl, wrapped tight around her shoulders, did nothing to stop the cold that had seeped into her bones. She had arrived on the train 2 days late, clutching a letter from a man she'd never met, a promise scratched in ink. "I'll meet you at the station. I've built a cabin past South Creek." That cabin was gone now. So was the bridge, so was the road, so was Grant Ellis. She had asked at the depot. No one knew him. She had gone to the post office. No letters came. She had waited under the eaves until the station master closed up, until even the stray dogs sought shelter elsewhere. Now, standing at the place where the South Creek used to whisper between stones, she found only ruin, trees broken like bones, beams tangled in weeds, a doorframe half buried in silt. It wasn't just that the cabin was gone, it was that the life she had imagined had been washed away before she ever touched it. She fell to her knees. The mud did not fight her fall. It welcomed her. Rain ran down her back like fingers pressing her into the earth. Her wedding gloves, once white, sank into the dirt as if mourning alongside her. Her hands trembled. Her breath came in short gasps. The wind howled like a wolf without a pack. No one would come. No one had ever come. Her last meal was 2 days ago. Her feet bled inside boots that did not fit. Her hope, that last thin thread she'd knotted around the letter, snapped under the weight of the storm. She didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, because the tears had long ago drowned inside her. All she had left was silence. Silence, and mud, and the sharp sting of being forgotten by the world. Then, a sound. Hooves. Faint, at first, too far to trust. She lifted her head. It could have been her imagination, playing cruel tricks. She'd heard voices before in the thunder. She'd seen her mother's face once in the mist. But this wasn't a dream. Not this time. The man came through the rain like he had written out of some old prayer. He was soaked like her, but upright, a long rifle strapped to his saddle, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, his face half-shadowed, half-scarred, a jagged mark from temple to jaw that looked carved by lightning. He said nothing. His horse shifted beneath him, ears twitching at the wind. But the man stayed still, just watching her like he'd seen this before, like he knew what it was to kneel in the mud and wish the earth would take you. Anna stood, or tried to. Her legs wavered like reeds in floodwater. Her voice cracked like old parchment. "Are you, Grant Ellis?" The man shook his head once. "No." "Then, why are you here?" He didn't answer right away. Then, without warning, he swung down from the saddle, boots hitting the mud like thunder. He stepped forward, boots sinking, coat soaked, eyes unreadable, and he lifted her, as if she weighed nothing, as if she were not ruined, not lost, not just another broken thing the storm had left behind. He said only one thing. "Because I buried 3 women yesterday. You're not gonna be the 4th. Then he turned, her in his arms, and walked back toward his horse. Blank. Blank. She didn't speak, didn't know how. Her hands clutched at his coat, heavy wool, soaked clean through, smelling of smoke and pine and sweat. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath shallow, her heart screaming behind her ribs. He hoisted her onto the saddle, climbed behind her, and wrapped one arm tight around her waist. The other held the reins. No words, no comfort, just motion, steady and sure, through a world washed clean of mercy. The land passed by in pieces. Trees broken and bent, fences snapped like matchsticks, barrels floating like forgotten prayers. The creek now a swollen ghost of itself. And through it all, she held on, not to the horse, not to the reins, but to the warmth behind her. The shape of him, the rhythm of his breath. She didn't know his name, but she would never forget his presence. When they reached the ridge, a cabin came into view, stone and timber tucked against the hill like it didn't want to be seen. The roof groaned in the wind. The door hung crooked on its hinges. It wasn't much, but it stood. He swung down first, turned, and reached up again. His hands found her waist. He lifted her gently, like she might break. Her legs failed her the moment they touched ground. But he caught her again. "You live here?" she whispered. He nodded once. Inside, the fire was cold, the stove untouched, the room spare and silent. One cot, one chair, a rifle in the corner. He moved without hurry, without noise, lighting the fire, piling dry logs, setting water to boil. She stood there, dripping, shaking. "Sit," he said, rough voice, deep like rock. She obeyed. The cot was hard, but it held. "What's your name?" she asked, voice small. He stirred the fire a moment before answering. "Colt Bennett." She repeated it softly. "Colt Bennett," as if it was something worth holding. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett." He didn't look at her. "Don't thank me yet." But she already had. In her heart, beneath the layers of cold and shame and sorrow, she had already thanked him like he was the last good thing the world had to give. And for the first time since stepping off that cursed train, Anna Graceland did not feel alone. The fire crackled low in the hearth. Shadows dancing across the rough timber walls like old spirits stirred from slumber. The rain still whispered against the roof. Softer now, no longer furious, just steady, a lullaby for the broken. Anna sat on the edge of the cot, Colt's heavy wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her dress, once soaked to the bone, now hung by the fire, steam rising like breath from its sleeves. The cabin smelled of cedar smoke and something quieter, like calm after storm. She hadn't spoken much since he brought her in, and he hadn't asked her to. Colt Bennett moved through the space like he belonged to the silence. His boots made no sound on the plank floor. His hands worked with practiced rhythm, stacking wood, stirring beans in the pot, wiping down his rifle with a cloth worn thin by time. He didn't ask who she was. Didn't question the ring that no longer sat on her finger. He didn't need to. The hurt was already there on her face, written in the way she flinched when kindness was offered. He saw it, but he didn't reach for it. He just gave her space. And space was a rare kind of mercy. When morning came, the rain had thinned into mist. The clouds hung low, soft as ash. Anna woke to the smell of coffee, strong, bitter, and black as midnight. She blinked, her body sore but warm, her limbs tucked beneath Colt's blanket like roots finding soil. He was already up, sitting near the door with a knife in hand, sharpening the blade with slow, steady strokes. His face, half shadowed by the rising sun, held no judgment, only stillness. "There's coffee," he said without looking. "Strong, bitter, like everything worth drinking." She smiled faintly, her lips cracked but grateful. "I'll take bitter over drowned." He stood, poured her a cup from the tin pot, and handed it to her without ceremony. Their fingers touched for a breath too long. His hand was rough, scarred and calloused like bark, but warm. And in that warmth was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. She drank, grimaced at the taste, and held the cup tighter. "Were you a ranger?" she asked. "Used to be," he said, setting the knife down. "Left after the River Gulch ambush. Nothing left to fight for after that." He didn't say more, didn't need to. She could see it in the way he watched the horizon through the window, as if ghosts lingered out there, waiting to be remembered. "They still call me," he added after a moment, "when they're desperate. But I don't ride for anyone else now." "Why help me, then?" she asked. "I wasn't on a wanted poster." Colt's jaw worked for a second, like the words didn't come easy. Then he said, "Because when you looked up at me in the mud, you didn't beg. You didn't cry. You just asked if I was the man you were supposed to marry." He looked at her then. Really looked. And I've never seen anyone look more alone. Anna lowered her gaze. Her throat tightened. She wasn't used to kindness without a price. Not from men. Not from the world. "This isn't your burden," she whispered. "You could have just left me there." "Yeah," he said, "and I've left people before. Buried enough regrets to know which ones haunt you the longest." He stood, crossed the room, and pulled out an old tin of beans and a crust of bread. Set them down with no apology for their plainness. "It ain't much," he said, "but it'll hold us till the river drops. Then you can figure where you want to go." Anna glanced around. The cabin was small. One cot, one stove, one chair, not made for two. But somehow, it felt like the safest place she'd ever been. She turned her eyes to him. What if I don't have anywhere to go? He didn't flinch, didn't pity her. He just nodded once. Then we'll figure it out. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Days passed like wind slipping through pine needles. Quiet, gentle, unspoken. Colt didn't talk much, but his actions filled the silence. He repaired the broken steps on the porch when he noticed her limp. He tacked new leather to the soles of her ruined boots. He hung extra blankets over the windows when the wind howled too loud at night. He didn't touch her without cause. He didn't look at her like she owed him something. He just stayed, and in that staying, she found something she hadn't dared hope for. She found steadiness, not the loud, sweeping kind, not promises whispered under stars only to be broken by morning. No, Colt's steadiness was quieter than that. It was in the way he passed her the water bucket without words. The way he waited for her to speak without pushing. The way he watched the horizon, but always came back inside when the sun dipped. And slowly, piece by piece, Anna found herself resting easier in the cot. She found herself adding kindling to the fire before he asked. She found herself setting out 2 cups instead of 1. One afternoon, while Colt fixed a leak in the roof, she found a bundle of wildflowers blooming behind the cabin, defiant little things that had no business growing in flood-washed soil. She picked them, tied them with twine, and placed them in an old jar by the window. When Colt came back in, he paused, eyes flicking toward the flowers. Then toward her. You made it look like someone lives here, he said. Anna looked at him, her heart steady now, her hands no longer shaking. Maybe someone finally does, she said, and in that moment, with the fire warm and the wildflowers bright against the gray outside, Anna realized something deeper than memory. Colt Bennett had not just offered her shelter from the rain. He had offered her a place to belong. And sometimes, that was the most sacred kind of love there was. The kind that didn't save you from drowning, but gave you somewhere solid to stand once you surfaced. The sound of hooves broke the stillness. It wasn't the soft kind, the wandering of strays or the slow rhythm of a tired rider. This was sharp, deliberate, the kind of sound made by men who came not to visit, but to take. Anna was down by the edge of the creek, gathering kindling where the grass had begun to rise again after the flood. The sun was low, gold pouring like honey through the trees. She heard them before she saw them, metal on leather, spurs clicking, reins creaking under the weight of riders who'd never had to ask for anything twice. She turned, heart tightening, eyes scanning the misted ridge. And then they appeared. 5 men, all on horseback, one with a tin badge pinned to his vest, another with a crooked grin and a look that spoke louder than words. Hats pulled low, dust on their boots, arrogance in their bones. Colt was already outside. He didn't shout, didn't posture, just stepped from the barn, rifle in hand, long and quiet like a shadow pulled from the earth. His shoulders were broad beneath his wool coat, his jaw set hard as the ridge behind him. And he walked, not toward Anna, but beside her, not in front, not shielding, beside. The leader of the men raised a hand in greeting, but his smile never touched his eyes. Morning, Ranger, he called. Colt didn't respond. His rifle hung loose but ready. We heard you had company up here. The man continued. Mail-order bride, real pretty, came in around the time the flood hit. Name's Anna Graceland, if it helps. Anna stood tall, though her hands trembled at her sides. The man leaned slightly in his saddle. Her groom, Grant Ellis, he's dead. Got himself shot in a saloon 2 counties east. Horse thief, from what we heard. His voice was smooth, like oil on water. Word is she never made it to the wedding. Never got any claim to land. No papers, no name on a deed. That makes her. He paused, eyeing Anna. Vulnerable. Colt finally spoke, voice low, even, unmoving. She's not vulnerable. The man raised a brow. No? Colt took a step forward. She's with me. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They carried like thunder through still air, final, full of weight. A declaration not of ownership, but of presence, of choice. The man in the badge shifted in his saddle. You claiming her, then? He asked, voice edged with threat. Colt's grip on the rifle didn't change. I'm saying you ride down this ridge. And you forget her name before your boots touch the next patch of dirt. Silence fell hard, like snow before an avalanche. Anna's breath caught, not because of fear, not anymore, because no one had ever spoken for her like that, not as a possession. Not as a burden, but as something worthy of standing beside. The men glanced between each other, calculating. They looked at Colt's stance, at the rifle, at the woman who didn't cower. And then, slowly, they turned. The leader tipped his hat, that smirk still clinging to his lips like dust that wouldn't shake off. Storm will wash this all out eventually, he said over his shoulder. So will memory. Colt didn't answer. He didn't need to. The horses retreated down the ridge, swallowed by pine and distance. Only when they were gone did Anna exhale, the breath she'd been holding spilling out like smoke. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Colt's eyes stayed on the tree line, watching the last of the riders fade. Yeah, I did. He turned to face her, voice low and rough like gravel under boot. Because you're not a secret. And I don't bury things I plan to keep. The words hung in the air, heavy, whole, like a promise made without ribbon or ring. Anna blinked, tears sharp behind her lashes, not of sadness, but of something stranger, something harder to carry. Gratitude, belonging, worth. She stepped closer, unsure if her legs would hold. No man had ever stood with her before, not in front, not behind, but with. Not to claim, not to possess, but to affirm. You are worth standing for. You don't know me, she said quietly. Not really. Colt looked at her, and in that gaze was something deeper than knowledge. It was understanding. I know how you hold silence like armor. I know you didn't flinch when the world forgot you. I know you're not someone who needs saving, but someone who deserves choosing. Anna pressed a hand to her chest, not because it ached, but because it finally felt full. No paper, no contract, no altar could have written what he just said with his presence alone. I don't belong to anyone, she whispered. No, he said. You belong here, if you choose it. The wind stirred through the trees again. No longer harsh, just cold. Honest air wrapping around them like an old blanket. And this time, Anna didn't shiver. She took Colt's hand, his scarred, calloused, silent hand, and held it like it was more than protection. It was home. And when she did, he didn't pull away, because in a world quick to erase the names of women like her, he had spoken hers like a prayer. Not to possess her, but to promise. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. And you will never be taken again. The earth softened first, not all at once, but little by little, like it, too, was learning to breathe again after holding its breath through flood and sorrow. Where the storm had carved deep wounds, green began to return, grass pushing up through cracks, flowers blooming in defiance beneath broken branches. The river, once a beast of destruction, now ran calm and clear, winding past the cabin like it had always been meant to be there. Inside that cabin, a new rhythm had taken hold. Not the rhythm of survival, the rhythm of living. Colt chopped wood before sunrise. The sound of his axe, steady, sure, matched the rising sun. Anna stirred biscuits with the last of the flour, humming under her breath, hands moving slow and gentle. She had learned the creaks in the floorboards, the way the fire liked to be fed, how the old kettle hissed just before it whistled. And in learning those small things, she found her place, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as a keeper of something real. They never spoke of love. They didn't need to. It was in the way he patched her boots with new leather, unasked, in the way she stitched curtains from an old feed sack, just to soften the light, in the way they shared silence not as strangers, but as two souls who no longer had anything to prove. One afternoon, while Colt worked on the fence line, Anna stood barefoot in the garden, her hand resting gently on the swell of her belly. The child moved inside her, slow and certain, like the turning of seasons. She smiled, not the smile of a girl who once stepped off a train with fear in her throat, but of a woman who had stayed. The cabin had changed, or maybe it hadn't. Maybe she had changed, and now she could finally see what was always there. Not just a roof, not just four walls, a home. When Colt returned from the field, he brushed straw from his sleeves and grinned that quiet grin, The one that started in his eyes and didn't need words to finish. Fence held through the thaw, he said. Anna laughed, her voice soft as sunlight on water. Not bad for two people who had no business rebuilding anything. He stepped closer, touched her belly with reverence. Speak for yourself, he murmured. You've been rebuilding since the day you stepped off that train. That evening, they laid the last stone at the edge of the garden. There was no marker, no cross, no name, just the place where Colt had first found her, collapsed in the cold. Mud on her gloves, eyes full of everything she thought she'd lost. He had lifted her from that earth not knowing her name. And now, months later, they stood together in the same spot. Stronger than before. Should we name it? She asked. The stone? Colt tilted his head. What would we call it? Anna placed her hand on her belly, the child kicking gently beneath her ribs. She looked at the earth beneath her boots and whispered, "The place where I got back up." Colt nodded once, deep and slow. Good name. The days passed like river water, clear, constant, sometimes still, sometimes dancing with light. They didn't count them. They measured life in small things. The way the bread rose better when Anna sang to it. The way Colt's shoulders eased when he sat beside her at dusk. The way the baby kicked harder when the fire cracked loud. Colt never asked for more than her presence. He didn't need a vow, didn't press for promises. But each morning, she found her hands reaching for his without thinking. Each night, she leaned into his warmth without fear. One twilight, after supper, Colt brought out something wrapped in oilcloth. Was gonna give this to someone once, he said, unwrapping it. Never got the chance. Anna opened the bundle with care. Inside was a small carved pendant, wooden, smooth, shaped like a feather, simple, strong. It's a patch, he said, from before I left the South Territory. A man gave it to me after I saved his boy. Said it meant silent protector. Figured it was for someone better than me. Anna touched the carving with shaking fingers. Why now? Colt looked at her, eyes deep as canyon stone. Because maybe I'm not the man I used to be. And maybe you're the one it was always meant for. She tied it around her neck, the feather resting over her heart. It didn't feel like a gift. It felt like recognition. You think I'm a protector? She asked, voice tight. You protect without needing a gun. He said, you see what's broken and fix it without complaint. That's more than I ever learned wearing a badge. She reached out, took his calloused hand in hers, held it tight. Outside, thunder grumbled once in the distance. But it never came closer. They stood on the porch, side by side, eyes on the sky. You think the storms are done? She asked. Colt slipped an arm around her waist, held her like a promise without words. No, he said, but I think we're ready now. And she believed him, because peace wasn't the absence of weather. It was knowing the walls could hold. And the heart inside them was finally home. The wind had changed. It no longer howled down the ridge or carried the scent of sorrow. Now it moved slow and warm, brushing the tops of the tall grass like fingers smoothing old scars. The land had healed in places, but not by miracle, by patience, by steady hands, by people who chose to stay. Anna found the letter in her old Bible, folded small between two pages turned soft with time. The ink had bled slightly from the storm. But the words were still legible, thin and careful, written in a hand that no longer felt like hers. To Grant Ellis, I am coming with faith, though I've never seen your face. If you are kind, I will be too. If you are cruel, I will survive. My hands can work, and my heart has not yet given up. That's all I bring. She held it with both hands, the paper trembling slightly between her fingers. It felt like opening a window into someone else's life. A woman who had packed her courage in a trunk, tied her hope in a shawl, and stepped onto a train believing she might find a beginning at the end of a long ride. But Grant was gone. He had died before she even arrived. And that girl, the one who wrote this, was gone too. Anna wasn't her anymore. She was someone who had weathered storms, real and buried. Someone who had fallen face first in the mud and been lifted up by a stranger who asked for nothing in return. Someone who had found warmth in a man's silence, safety in a cabin with only one bed, and love in the way things grew again, without asking permission. The door creaked behind her. She turned. Colt stood there in his work shirt, shoulders damp from the morning's labor. Boots muddy, hands rough. He looked at the letter. Then at her. That yours? He asked. She nodded. It was. A long time ago. He stepped forward, eyes lingering not on the letter, but on her. You want to burn it? Anna stared at the page, then shook her head. No, I want to remember who I was when I wrote it. Colt didn't argue. He never did. He took the paper from her gently, folded it again with care, and walked to the mantel where she'd set a smooth river stone beside a small bowl. He tucked the letter beneath the rock like it was sacred. Let it be a reminder, he said, not of what you lost, but of what you survived. Anna swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken of her past like that, not as something broken, but as something brave. She looked up. What about you? What about me? You got anything you never sent? Colt thought for a long time. Yeah, he said, my resignation. Was gonna quit the Rangers. Never did. Just stopped showing up. Why? His jaw tightened, eyes drifting to the window. Because quitting meant admitting I couldn't save the ones I was supposed to. So I stayed in between. Not gone, not there, just waiting. And now? He looked at her fully. Now I think I've found a reason to stop running from the man I've been, and try being the man I want to be. Anna stepped close, pressed her fingers to his chest. Then let's start fresh. You and me, no letters, just this. Colt's hand covered hers. This is enough, he said. Later that evening, they walked to the edge of the garden. The sky above was streaked with amber and indigo. The last light of day stretched long shadows behind them. Colt carried a flat stone, smooth and gray, heavy like memory. Together, they placed it at the spot beneath the willow, where snow had once buried her knees, where mud had swallowed her gloves, where silence had almost claimed her voice. Colt stood back. Anna knelt beside the stone, her hand resting atop it. We should name it, she said. He tilted his head. What would we call it? She smiled, her other hand resting on the gentle curve of her stomach. The place where I got back up. Colt's eyes softened. Good name. They stood there for a long while, the wind moving through the leaves, the world holding its breath in the quiet way it sometimes did when something sacred was being laid down, not in grief, but in reverence. Anna looked at the stone and felt no sadness. She felt triumph, because the woman who had knelt there months ago was not the woman who stood here now. She had not been delivered by fate. She had rescued herself, with muddy hands, steady steps, and a heart that refused to quit. Back on the porch, Colt pulled something from his pocket. Wrapped in cloth, it was small, worn smooth with age. He handed it to her. Inside was a wooden pendant, carved like a feather. What's this? She asked. A patch, he said. Made it years ago. A man gave me the idea. Said it meant silent protector. Figured it wasn't mine to wear. She looked up, understanding already blooming behind her eyes. Why give it to me? Colt shrugged, but his voice was steady. Because you protect in ways I never could. You stayed kind. You stayed present. And you didn't leave, even when you could have. Anna tied the pendant around her neck. It rested just over her heart. Outside, thunder rumbled once far off. But it never came. They sat on the porch together, side by side, as stars blinked into the deepening sky. You think I was meant to come here? She asked softly. Colt shook his head. No, I think you survived your way here. That's stronger than fate. She rested her head against his shoulder. And you? He looked at her, the firelight catching in his eyes. I was just a man with an empty cabin. Didn't know how cold it was. Until you lit a fire I never want to put out. And as the baby kicked gently, and the breeze moved through the trees like a hymn only the land could sing. Anna knew. This was no ending. It was the beginning she'd earned. With every breath she hadn't given up. With every step she'd taken after falling. And that stone in the garden? It wasn't a grave. It was a monument. To a woman who rose when the world gave her every reason not to.